You're listening to Men of Abundance, episode 144, with Christian Picciolini. Hey, I got it right. And today we're talking about hate, more specifically, life after hate.
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
What is going on, all of you amazing, abundant leaders out there? I am Wally Carmichael, your host and founder of the Men of Abundance podcast, the Pay It Forward community. Today's conversation, man, we go deep. And this one is kind of personal because this subject really does touch some of my very, very earliest life. Growing up around bikers, around specific individuals who, quite frankly, lived this lifestyle. And I'm not going to get that deep into my personal life. Just know that this is a difficult subject for me, but I am willing to talk about it. In fact, I will tell you that later in my military career, when I went on to be an equal opportunity advisor, some of the people that I grew up with were like, "You're doing what?" Do they know your background? And, well, let's just say people do change. And that is the conversation that I have with Christian today. It is, like I said, a very deep conversation, very thought-provoking, and I'll let you listen to the conversation before I get into my thoughts on this. And as you know, at the end of most every show, I always share my thoughts, and I will certainly do that at the end of the show today, and also share it a little bit in the show notes at menofabundance.com. Now, if you're brand new to Men of Abundance, I want to personally welcome you and thank you for being here. And I would like for you to go back and thank whoever it is that turned you on to Men of Abundance. And if you're a man, I would love to have you in our Men of Abundance community. Just go to menofabundance.com/members or click on the members only tab at the top of any one of the pages at menofabundance.com. Get access so you can get in on this conversation, because some of my guests are in there as well, and you can have specific conversations with them in reference to some of these issues and some of these conversations that we have on the show. And of course, I would love to humbly ask for you to take just a few minutes to go to menofabundance.com. Underneath any one of the podcast shows, there's a podcast player where you can listen to the show. Click on the iTunes or click on the Android. Number one, subscribe to either one of those podcast players, whichever one it is that you use to listen to the show, and leave a rating and review. This small act of abundance and paying it forward pays huge dividends in iTunes searches and basically anybody searching for abundance and other men looking to live a life of abundance. Here's just one of the latest 5-star reviews on iTunes. It's by Nicole Jensen. The title is Inspiring and Mind Expanding. Really enjoying listening to Wally and his inspiring guests. Love the format, stimulating questions, and valuable tips and habits. Truly inspiring and mind expanding. Keep up the great work, Wally. I truly appreciate that, Nicole, and I appreciate anybody else who has left a 5-star review. Chances are I've read yours on the podcast at one point in time, because I have read every single one of them at this point. Again, I would love to hear your feedback, not just because it boosts us up in the searches on iTunes, but also because I truly want to hear your feedback. All right, now it's time for me to introduce you to our featured guest. Christian Picciolini is an Emmy Award-winning television producer, a prolific public speaker, a published author, and a reformed extremist. His work and life purpose are born of an ongoing and profound need to atone for his grisly past and to make something of his time on this planet by contributing to the greater good. After leaving the far-right hate movement he was part of during his youth, he began the painstaking process of rebuilding his life. Christian earned a degree in international relations from DePaul University, began his own global entertainment media firm, and was appointed a member of the Chicago Grammy Rock Music Committee and board member for the Chicago International Movies and Music Festival. In 2016, Christian won an Emmy Award for directing and producing Exit USA's There Is Life After Hate PSA, and has been nominated for 4 regional Emmy Awards. He is an appointed United Nations affiliate ambassador for I Change Nations, and was honored with a National Statesman Award. Christian is an associate for the USC Price Homegrown Violent Extremist Program and has worked as an adjunct professor at the college level. He contributed to Google chairman Eric Schmidt's and Jared Cohen's New York Times bestseller, The New Digital Age. Most notably, in 2009, he co-founded Life After Hate, a nonprofit helping people disengage from hate and violent extremism. In 2015, he published his memoirs, Romantic Violence, Memoirs of an American Skinhead. Men of Abundance, it is my honor to introduce you to Christian Picciolini. Christian, welcome to Men of Abundance, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, seriously, my pleasure, and we're yet to see where this conversation is going to go. I'm pretty excited about this because I've got a background in some of what you do on a different end of it, but we'll get into that. Where are you at in the world today?
I am, very rarely I am at home, and I happen to be home right now in sunny Chicago.
Oh, good for you. It's good to be home.
It is good to be home.
I have not been to Chicago. I've got some friends from Chicago, and I have not been down around those parts yet, but I do plan on getting down there and around there and checking out the scenery in the area and stuff.
You know, it's a beautiful part of the country. It's we've got great architecture and great lake and good food and amazing museums and culture. It's a great place to visit. You should come down sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely we'll check it out.
Yeah.
Cool. So before we get too much into the show, I really like to start out the show pretty much the way I start out every single morning, which is with an attitude of gratitude. What do you have to be grateful for today, Christian?
You know, I'm actually really grateful for my good friend Tim Russin, who came over to my house today and helped me finish connecting up my podcast studio. So that's why you get to hear me nice and crystal clear today, because he came over this morning, and I'm very grateful for that.
That's awesome, and you do sound great.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
That's all due to Tim Russin.
Very
Best
good.
engineer I've ever worked with ever in my life, and I've been in the music business for 20 years, and he's an amazing engineer.
Well, that's impressive. So, yeah, at the end of this one, if you got any any links or anything like that, let me know. I'll make sure I'll plug them in the show notes.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, before we got started here, I talked a little bit in the intro about what you're doing, what you've been up to, and my goodness, you have one hell of a background. You've taken it to a level that most really just wouldn't even consider, and I thank you for that. I really do. But here on Men of Abundance, we like to get to know the person and the man behind the abundance. So if you would, tell us a little bit more about yourself that maybe the average person doesn't really get to hear very much from you, and let's get a little bit personal.
Sure. Well, aside from running the nonprofit, which we help people disengage from violent extremist groups, on a more personal level, I'm a father. I've got two amazing young men that are my sons, who couldn't make me more proud every day as they grow. My wife, Britton, gosh, I couldn't do anything, I think, without her. She's my rock. She's my logic. She is definitely my better half. And I'm fortunate enough to love what I do. And I wake up every morning trying to figure out how to help people. And that for me is really very fulfilling, because, most of my life I felt as though I was angry at the world. And I've realized, over the last 20 years that, I want to help the world. I want to help people not go down the same path that I did, and share the knowledge that I have on this path that I've taken with other people who might be lost, like I was. Yeah,
I really felt that through your bio and reading through what you've done and getting to know you a little bit, through your social media and stuff that you've got going on, and just seeing what you've done. And then you've got the nonprofit. You mentioned it, Life After Hate. Tell us a little bit about that, and where did that come from? How did that really come about? And by doing that, I kind of want you to go into where you were at in your life.
Sure.
And how did it evolve into Life After Hate, and then ultimately kind of rolling into your memoirs that you've got, Romantic Violence, Memoirs of an American Skinhead, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So Life After Hate I co-founded it in 2009 basically as a way for me and my business partner to tell our stories, because we had never really been able to share our stories of what we had gone through. You know, me personally, from the time I was 14 years old until I was 22, from 1987 to 1995, I was a member of America's first neo-Nazi skinhead group, based right here in Chicago. And, I've spent the last 22 years searching again after I left that and trying to find myself and who I really was this time. And it led me to my business partner who, was going through the same thing. And we said, you know what, we need to start telling our stories. We need to start talking about how we changed and what transformed us so that other people that were like us can benefit from that. So it started off with this idea of putting, it out there in the ether and seeing what happened. And what we found out was that a lot of people who thought that they were the only ones on earth that were going through the same thing that we went through, now wanted to share their stories as well. We've since pivoted. In 2011, we became a nonprofit, and now we've taken the knowledge and our experience of being in these extremist groups and helping other people now disengage from those same hateful ideologies and hate groups. And we've been going strong now for nearly a decade, completely bootstrapped on our own. And we've built a network of over 100 people that we've brought together after they've left that hateful life behind.
Interesting. So how is that message being received?
Oh, it's, it's certainly... it's overwhelmingly positive. We certainly have our detractors who, are typically the people who are in that type of a movement. But I think we've provided a tremendous service to hundreds of people who, are either searching for help for themselves or maybe searching for help for a loved one or somebody that they care about. And helped steer them onto the right path, and then provided a support network for them of people that were just like them. And it's been an overwhelming success and hugely positive results so far.
That's really good to hear. It really is. Back in the early 2000s, actually, it was 2001. Was it? No, it wasn't. It was 2004. I was at active duty Army, and I had the opportunity to go to the military's Equal Opportunity Advisors course. And while in that course, in that almost 4-month course, we were introduced. We had a guest speaker come, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name. And I just thought about this, actually. I was thinking about it when I first was introduced to you, and I can't remember his name, but he was a very well-known speaker who was same situation, former skinhead. He told some amazing, just horrendous stories.
Was his name T.J. Layden?
T.J. Yes, T.J.
TJ is a great friend of mine. He's an amazing individual who was really one, if not the first, to come out and talk about his story. Unfortunately, he's going through some health issues now that's limited his capacity to be able to go out and speak and tell that story. But I urge people to go out and look at YouTube videos for TJ Layden and hear his story. He's an amazing individual.
I do too, definitely. And he told his story about when he was sitting down watching TV, a cartoon with his kids, and one of his boys stood up and said something derogatory, and he was like, wow, that's where my kids are going to be when they're my age. And that's when it was kind of his aha moment, and he had to make that change. What was that moment for you that really made you want to realize what you were doing wasn't healthy for you, and made you want to first really just get out of the environment?
It was a lot of those kind of aha moments, those magic moments, and it started with the birth of my first child, my son, and holding him in the delivery room and suddenly reconnecting with the innocence that I lost at 14 years old. But the real point of transformation for me, came around 1994 when I opened a record store in Chicago because I wanted to sell this white power music that I was importing from Europe. And I opened a small shop, and that music became 75% of my gross sales. And because I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I wanted to not just take money from, my friends, I thought, well, I'm going to sell hip hop and I'm going to sell punk rock and heavy metal. And what happened next, I never really could have imagined. The people that came in to buy that music, they knew who I was and who I had been for the last 8 years. And they were African American and they were gay and they were Jewish. But instead of breaking my windows or attacking me or threatening me, they came in with compassion for me and with empathy. And it was, in fact, the compassion and empathy that they saw in me from the people that I least deserved it from, when I least deserved it, that really forced me to humanize them and see that what I was doing was completely wrong.
Mm. Yeah, that's I refer to that as divine intervention and a significant emotional event, I would think, on your part, because it was kind of confusing to you that these are the people that I'm trained and have learned to hate in such a terrible way, and this is contrary to what I was taught to believe.
Yeah, well, you see, most people that I knew in that movement never ever had a meaningful interaction with the people that they thought they hated. I certainly didn't. And it was easy to dehumanize people or to make them seem like monsters or parasites or garbage if you didn't know them. And I always say that hatred is born of ignorance. Fear is its father and isolation is its mother. When we're so afraid of something because we don't understand it, and we're so detached from them that we never get the opportunity to understand it, sometimes we rationalize our own biases by pointing the finger at the other person, simply because it's easier than looking internally to see if perhaps we're the cause of those problems.
Wow. Yeah, fear is its father and isolation is its mother. I had never heard that, but that is, wow, that gives me chills because that is so absolutely correct. And I can think of many remedies for that. But before we get into that, I would like to, I'm sure you've got quite a few kick-in-the-gut moments along your path. I would love for you to share with us one of those kick-in-the-gut moments to really take us to a point in life that you really felt down to your knees, kicked in the gut, and really didn't feel like you'd be able to recover, but obviously you have.
Yeah. There is one moment in particular that I've still never been able to shake, even after, 25 years. And it occurred one night in the early 90s when some friends of mine and I, skinheads of course, were out drinking late one night. And, we had walked into a McDonald's and there were 3 young black teenagers in line. And when we walked in, I yelled, "This is my McDonald's, get out." And of course they ran and we chased after them. And when we were crossing the street or running after them as we were crossing the street, one of the black teenagers pulled out a gun and started to fire at us. And didn't hit any of us, but the gun jammed. And we caught this individual, this young man. And we proceeded to beat him very, very badly. And it was at one point, and this is one of those moments of clarity that I had along the way, where as I was kicking him while he was on the ground, I looked into his eyes, and for a moment he opened them and we connected, and I felt empathy for him. I felt as though he could have been my brother or my father or my mother. It could have easily have been one of them. And that feeling that overcame me and how I would have felt had it been one of them suddenly made me think of how that might make him and his loved ones feel. And that was really the last time I committed an act of violence. And I don't know what it was specifically about that moment. But it was a very awakening, enlightening moment for me. I didn't know how to understand it at the time, but it was something that definitely made an impact on me.
Wow. Yeah, I can definitely feel that. So what was next? What was next in your life? How did that progress in your mind?
It was a lot of questioning along the way. A lot of, those 8 years, even though I was very passionate about what I was doing, and I was, a respected leader within the movement, and I had built this persona because I had been in bands that, were the first to travel outside of the United States to play. And, but I always had these questions of, is what I'm doing, does it make me feel right, or does it make me feel good, or is it right, or is it good? This moral dilemma, this internal struggle. And I'm glad that those situations arose, and I'm glad that people who I hated, found it in them to engage me in a dialogue that was meaningful. Because it's those moments, not the times when I was, spit at or punched or had my tires slashed, that changed me. Those are the times that made me angrier and wanted me to come back, and fight even harder for what I was doing. But it was the moments when I received that compassion from the people that I least deserved it from, when I least deserved it, that really had a huge impact on me. And it was those progressive moments along the way where I began to slowly pull out. And when I did, it was too late. Because my wife and my children had left me by that point, because I just hadn't left quickly enough. I didn't have a great relationship with my parents, even though they tried very, very hard. When I left the movement, eventually in 1995, when I was 22, I had lost my wife and my kids. I'd lost my business because I closed the record store when I decided to pull the white power music, because I was so embarrassed to sell it in front of these new friends and people that I respected. And I lost my family because the one that I had built around me that had become my community, I left. So I went through a period of really deep confusion and loss of hope, even more so than the loss of hope that caused me to go down that path to begin with. Because I had tried to outrun who I was. I was too embarrassed to talk about it. I tried to move. I tried to, wear long sleeves to cover my tattoos, and I didn't talk about my past. And when I finally decided to, because I was urged to by somebody who I had hurt in the past, it kind of changed my life, because I had now started to explain that I used to be this person, and the people I was telling just couldn't believe that who I was describing was the person that they knew. And that was, refreshing, that I was actually able to start to forgive myself and seek forgiveness for the things that I had done. And that's really what led me down the path that I'm on today, which is, to make sure I take that message out to other folks so that they, if they're stuck, they can get out, and if they're teetering on the edge of going in, they decide not to, because it really is it's just misery waiting to happen with no possible positive outcome. So that has been the path.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're sharing that. Man, I just want you to understand and want you to listen to what he said. And one of the things that I really got out of everything that he said there, which was quite a bit and very chilling for me anyway, is the good message, good dialogue, good actions will always prevail. He said that the slashing of the tires, it pissed him off, but that's not ultimately where you ended up taking your message, and you ultimately turned your mess into your message, and now you're helping others get out of the movement. How is that working out? I'd love for you to share any good news stories that you have as far as any young men who have, or women for that matter, because I know there's women in the movement as well, that how did they get into the movement? In most cases, or in many cases, I'm sure it varies, but what is the psychology and what is the thought process that gets them into the movement, and then what are you doing to help get them out of it?
Sure. Yeah, it's really very similar, even though the micro circumstances are different. The reason that people join any type of extremist movement, whether we're talking about a neo-Nazi or a white nationalist group, or even a leftist group, or even ISIS, or even an inner city gang, let's say, and it's three really fundamental human needs, and that is not ideology. They're identity, community, and a sense of purpose. Those are three things that every person on earth searches for at some point, almost always at the same time. who am I? Where do I belong? Who's my tribe? Who are my people? Where will I be accepted? And how can I change the world? Those are the three questions we all ask. And if there is something broken underneath that, or some sort of a perceived grievance, or a pothole, I call them potholes because they're the things that deviated us from our intended path. And those things can be things like trauma or abuse or addiction or poverty or lack of employment or lack of education, or mental illness. In my case, it was abandonment. I felt abandoned by my parents at a very young age. Because those things existed under that search for identity, community, and purpose, and because I had been marginalized from my whole youth, when somebody presented me the opportunity to be powerful and to be included and to belong to something, when I felt the most powerless and excluded, at 14 years old, I jumped at that opportunity, not even paying attention to the politics of it because I was 14. I didn't know anything about, race or politics or identity politics even. It was I was still trading baseball cards or trying to trade baseball cards at that point. But I didn't belong anywhere. And this man, who happened to be America's first neo-Nazi skinhead leader, his name was Clark Martel, he found me in an alley one day when I was smoking a joint, and he walked up to me and he pulled that joint out of my mouth and he said, "Don't you know that that's what the communists and the Jews want you to do to keep you docile?" I didn't know what a communist was. I didn't know what a Jew was. I didn't know, what the word docile meant. But this man paid attention to me, and he brought me into his world, and he gave me friends, and he gave me power when I felt the most powerless. And I completely overlooked what it took to get to those places. Because what was more important to me than anything else was belonging and finding a place. What I do now to help other people is I do the same thing that happened to me. Is, first of all, I treat them in a very compassionate way, even though I don't agree with what they believe or how they go about it. I certainly understand where they come from because I was that person at one point in my life. So I listen, and I listen for those potholes. And what I do when I identify what they are is I start filling them. I will find them, education provider, or I'll find them a life coach or a mental health professional or therapist or even a job sometimes. And it could be tattoo removal. It could be a million different things. And I work on the person. I work on the human, and to make that person more resilient. I don't argue ideologically with them and tell them that they're wrong, because again, that'll just make us, divide further and angrier. And it's pretty amazing what happens, Wallace, when the person becomes more resilient. The need to blame the other for problems lessens more and more. Because now they're equipped, they're more confident, they're more resilient. The way I do challenge the ideological narrative is not by addressing it and telling them they're wrong. It's by introducing them to people that they think that they hate. I may bring a Holocaust denier to meet with a Holocaust survivor, or an Islamophobe to meet with an imam, or to have dinner with a Muslim family, or somebody who is a homophobe to meet with, or have lunch with a gay couple. And like I said earlier, most times these people who hate have never had a meaningful interaction or dialogue with those people that they hate. So this is the first time, and suddenly they get the opportunity to humanize them and understand that we have many, many more similarities than we have differences, and that the differences are really to be appreciated, because that's what makes us unique. And that's what adds all the color to our world, with art and music and tradition and culture. And then afterwards, it's very important that when you take people out of a community to put them in a new one. So we provide a support network of over 100 people that we've helped that were at some point just like them.
Wow, Christian, this conversation right here and everything you just said just completely and totally energizes me. I love diversity. And I love that you said you bring in all the different colors together. I've often heard this analogy over the years, the melting pot analogy. And I never liked that melting pot analogy, because that basically brings everybody together as one and makes us all one color. And
Right.
I'm more of like if you're into analogies, guys, I like the pot of stew analogy, in that you throw in your meat, your potatoes, your carrot, your spices, all this other stuff, and it becomes something new, but you still can identify the carrot, the meat, the potatoes, the celery. You can identify all of these other ingredients, and they take on
I
the
like
flavor
that.
of each other. Yeah.
I hope you don't mind if I use that in
Absolutely
the future.
not.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, absolutely not. Just give me credit twice, and then it's yours.
You got it. You got it.
But I mean,
But, you know,
seriously, it's. I grew up in my high school was 10% Caucasian. If you've ever seen the movie Spare Parts with George Lopez, that's the high school I graduated from, Carl Hayden High School.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and good movie, by the way. And so I grew up, is predominantly Hispanic, and I just knew I couldn't stay there, because I just really enjoyed meeting other people. And even years ago, I was always open to try new things. So it just energizes me to be in an environment where people can get along. Now, I can't say we always got along growing up in high school. I got into a lot of fights because of the long blonde hair and the Hispanic, little gang members and stuff going around. But we had our differences. But most of the time we were fighting over stupid things like, my rock and roll's better than your rap music type of thing. It's just ridiculous,
Right. Yeah, and no, that's just part of growing up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think we do need to change the culture of the way we're raising kids and really support them more and provide them with opportunity, because I tell you what, you show me somebody without hope and I will show you somebody who will pick up a gun or be violent or go down a negative path. We're not doing enough, I think, to support the people who need it the most, and providing opportunity to young people, so that they can pursue their passions and not have to search for them in negative places.
What do you think that we can do if we're not doing enough? And I do agree with you. What thought process would you come up with?
It ranges from everything as simple as, when your children are born, start feeding them ethnic foods, because maybe if they're not afraid to eat Indian food or Japanese food or African food, maybe they won't be so afraid of those people. Instead of feeding them grilled cheese sandwiches and chicken nuggets, to, a larger, more grand scale approach of building incubators, micro incubators in underserved communities, specifically for community members to come in and try to start businesses, to create opportunity in the places that really are underserved and seriously lacking. I think that there's a lot we need to do, and I think we need to we have a lot of smart people who can pick these projects, actually run with them and make them happen.
It's so funny you say that, and it just dawned on me. When I was a very young man, we were super poor, and we always, occasionally, you had these, I think it was a church service going around, and they were giving out ethnic food, and in fact, it was Indian food. And my dad and my mom was like, we're not going to eat that crap, and I'm like, I'll eat it, at that age, because I always, I just wanted to try it. I loved it. I ate up every bit of it, and they wouldn't touch it. And it's so funny because you brought up Indian food, and as a medic traveling around the world, everybody always said, "Hey, let Doc try it. He'll eat anything," and I would. I had an iron gut, but they quickly learned that just because Doc will try it doesn't mean and likes it doesn't mean that they will. That's interesting, and I agree with you. Just as simple as trying different ethnic foods is very important, and not like, Mexican food isn't Taco Bell type of thing. Really go out and embrace the culture in that.
Exactly. If we keep, it goes back to that, isolation and fear thing. If we're so isolated from things and we never get the opportunity to enjoy them, we become afraid, and that's not fair to ourselves to do that to ourselves. Why would we want to limit our happiness? Why would we want to cut off our abundance to all this beautiful culture and history and storytelling and everything that's happened in the world in every corner of the globe? Why would we want to squander that abundance?
Yeah. So amazing. We can go on and on with this conversation, Christian. I know I can for sure. I don't know if you're I'm sure you're not tired of talking about it, but I can just have these conversations forever. But we're at the point in the show where we're going to pay it forward to our abundant leaders. You ready to do that?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Outstanding. So give our abundant leaders 1 to 3 actionable steps that they can take today.
I'll give them one step with 3 words. Make good happen. If it doesn't fit that criteria, don't do it.
Oh, I love it.
It's easy to remember.
Yeah, I love it. What does that look like?
It's from staring at people's eyes instead of the pixels on your phone when you are walking down the street, to opening a door, to maybe stopping and saying hello to somebody you wouldn't normally do, or to go out of your way to volunteer in a place that make good happen. And if what you're about to do doesn't fit that criteria, maybe you shouldn't be doing it.
Wonderful. I love it. Thanks for sharing that. What daily habits make up the biggest impact in your life, Christian?
I think for me, it's staying organized. I've learned, I used to be, and I still am to a degree, the kind of guy who is, fly by the seat of his pants because that's exciting to me. But I've learned that I have to be organized. And that's not just to keep me sane, but that's so I can serve people more efficiently. Eat healthy, run, and love your family. Spend time with them. Good balance is important.
It is, absolutely. So what are you reading or listening to now that you would recommend to our abundant leaders, and why?
Oh, good question. I am currently reading Tranny by Laura Jane Grace. It's a memoir by the singer of a punk band called Against Me, who went through a transition recently. And it's a pretty amazing book. As far as music, let's see. Right now I am listening to 2 bands. One called Foxy Shazam from Cincinnati, Ohio, and the other band is Portugal the Man from Wasilla, Alaska.
Wasilla, Alaska. I'll have to check that out. I haven't. That's one thing I have to say that I really don't get a whole lot into is really new types of music. Although my wife and I have uncannily recently been listening a lot to bluegrass. We just find it so calming to just have it in the house or even when we're driving. I don't know where that came from. She started, and she's from Panama. And we've been listening to bluegrass. I'm like, very interesting.
It's funny that you say that, because literally a half hour before we started this show here, my son came in and he came to pick up his camping equipment because he and his friends were going for a couple of days to a bluegrass festival, and they were camping out. So
how awesome is that?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Very interesting. So what do you feel holds most people back from truly living their life of abundance?
Fear.
Yeah.
I think we are afraid. I think we're afraid of what success and failure looks like, and we're afraid of each other even though we don't know each other. And I think if we were just to let down our guard a little bit and take the initiative to make that first step, we'll find out that there's really nothing to be afraid of.
We're afraid of each other even though we don't know each other. And that's what fear is, right? Fear is it's the unknown. You don't know what's on the other side.
Right.
Absolutely. So what does living a life of abundance mean to you?
I think it goes back to those 3 words, making good happen. It's as long as I'm leaving more positive footprint than I'm taking, I think then I am living a life of abundance. So my goal is to leave more good in the world than I've left bad behind.
Absolutely. We're going to have your website here linked up in the show notes. That's Christian.
Like a peach.
Picciolini. Do it.
You got it.
Man.
Come on, baby. Come on. Picciolini. You got
Picciolini. It. Okay, I got it. Picciolini. I told you I wasn't going to try to say it during the show. I was going to practice it first, but I appreciate that. And I'll have that linked up in the show notes at menofabundance.com. So, Christian, before we close up here, what would you like to ensure that our abundant leaders get out of our conversation that we didn't talk about already?
I think that the most important thing that I've learned along the way and that I've helped other people realize is that people can change. And that sometimes we have to embrace the people that say the ugliest things for them to understand that those things that they're saying are wrong. That love and compassion really are the most powerful tool against hate. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. It really does. It really is that simple. And if we just practice it more often, it can make a huge difference. So how can anybody else, other than your website, how can anybody else reach you or find out more about what you're doing, get a hold of your memoirs and all that good stuff?
Sure. You can find me on all the usual social media places like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. My website you'll have posted, but if they're interested in the nonprofit, that's lifeafterhate.org. And you can find my book, Romantic Violence, Memoirs of an American Skinhead, on Amazon or at your local bookstore.
Excellent. And again, I'll have all of that linked up in the show notes, guys. You don't have to worry about writing everything down. I'll have all of the social media there. You definitely want to get in and follow people and follow somebody like Christian, because you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You don't have to spend that time with them physically. Get them in your earbuds, get them on your Twitter feeds, whatever platform that you pay attention to. Start changing up a little bit and get to know people that you don't normally know. And one more thing about this, and I'd like your thought process on this as well, Christian, before we close this up. Sure. Is don't make your social media, if you're big on social media, and I know some of you aren't, but one way to really expand your mind is to do what you can to follow people. You don't have to friend them. You can just follow people that don't look like you, don't think like you, don't act like you. Even people that you know for a fact you don't agree with how they think. It will expand your thought process to at least be able to have an intelligent argument if you choose to do so. But follow people that aren't like you. What are your thoughts on that, Christian?
Yeah, I think that's great. But I think more than that, if you are one of those, people who might hate, challenge yourself. If you think you're powerful and more superior, challenge yourself to actually get to know the people that you hate, so that you can speak from a place of understanding. On the flip side, if you are one of the hated, if you are one of the marginalized, don't feel so, to be yourself. Go out there and make yourself known to the people that you think may have opposing views, and show them the true you. Because, again, everybody I've known that's left this movement has said, it's because I got to know the people that I hated.
Well, that part, there's a whole different conversation, and I'm glad you brought that up, and we will get into that at another point in time. But today, Christian, we're going to close this up. I truly appreciate your time. Thank you very much for getting your message out and doing what you're doing to get people out of that hate mentality and out of that movement and any other movement like it. Really, just thank you so much. Aloha.
My pleasure, Doc. Aloha.
All right, guys, I told you that was going to be a little bit deep. And before I get too much into my thoughts on this, I want to thank Kevin Henry for introducing Christian and I. Kevin is out here in Hawaii with me, but he's got a really cool Facebook community called the Diversity Community. He also has a weekly live call that you can get in on where they're talking about all the subjects around diversity. And he's in the process of putting a podcast together around the idea and the benefits of diversity. And as you may know, I am super energized with the whole idea of diversity, like Christian and I were just talking about. I absolutely love when people from such drastically different backgrounds can come together for a common good and get along with each other. We can all have our differences, and we do have our differences, and that's the beautiful thing of it. That's like I was talking about in our conversation about the pot of stew. We are different, but we also have a lot of similarities. But even with those differences, any organization that is very well diverse and they have a lot of different thinkers, men, women, people from all different cultures, they are the best businesses out there on the planet because they got so many great ideas coming together. And then they have great leadership who knows how to put all those ideas together and come out on the other end with an amazing product and service. Same thing with the families. Families that come together, even though even families, they don't get along all the time, but when they come together, it's just a beautiful thing. Look at the adversities of your country. Look at the United States. When anything drastic, anything traumatic happens in the United States of America, all of us put all of our differences aside and we come together to help each other out. Why can't it be like that all the time? I mean, when it's not going to be nirvana, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm just talking about living together, having a better chance to understand each other, and just taking the time to have that conversation. So I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to those action steps that Christian shared. Go out and meet somebody, get to know somebody, thank somebody who probably doesn't deserve your words, probably doesn't deserve your thanks. And just in case you're wondering, the reason why they may not deserve your thanks is because some way that they may have treated you or somebody who looks or acts like you. Thank them. Tell them, hey, I recognize you as a person, I recognize you as a human being, and I appreciate you. And walk away. That's it. Chances are it may not change them at that point in time, but it will at the very least plant a seed and say, that was different. That's not what I've expected from that type of person. Give it a try. Guys, make sure you share this episode with everybody. Share it on all of your social media. Just share it. And go out there and live your life of abundance. And make sure to pay it forward.
That's all for today, Abundance Leaders. For more about our guests and the powerful information we shared with you today, be sure to sign up for our mailing list at menofabundance.com. We appreciate your time and look forward to hanging out with you on our next episode. So until then, be sure to pay it forward and live your life of abundance.